So, folks, we are now on part 2 of this Alien Enemies Act of 1798 deep dive. That has unfortunately become very relevant because Donald Trump has decided to try and invoke that 1798 law in order to justify deporting people from the United States without any uh, established cause, without any due process, meaning they don't get to have their moment in front of a judge with a lawyer and legal representation. It is simply that he believes he has the unilateral authority to deport anyone from the country for any reason, and no one gets to say bupkis about it. No one gets to say, you can't do that, or you have the wrong person, or you have no evidence for the charges, because there are no charges, because he's just saying, I want it to be so, get rid of that person, like he is a king or a petty tyrant. And if you're saying, but Jack, like king or petty tyrant, like that seems unfair. I mean, sure, he called himself a king on social media, but like he's not actually a king, right? And I want you to hold on to that mental question because we're going to get to it. We're actually going to circle all the way back around and come back to that question of being a king. So with that being said, it's time for us to dive into what actually happened after Donald Trump invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act. A law that has only been invoked a handful of times in American history, always after the United States has engaged in a declared war against a foreign power. It was used for Japanese internment camps. It is historically one of the most odious pieces of legislation in our country's history. It is bad. There are still people alive to this day who were interred in Japanese internment camps, like notably Sulu from Star Trek, George Takei. He still remembers his time in the internment camps. It was not good, actually. And what we're seeing play out here is essentially Donald Trump saying he has the unilateral authority to deport people, right? And the first group of people he targeted and the justification he used to invoke the Alien Enemies Act is essentially he argued that the United States is kind of at war with Venezuela insofar as he tries to argue the Venezuelan government and the gang Tren de Aragua are the same, that Tren de Aragua is funded by and backed by the Venezuelan government, and therefore he is justified in invoking the Alien Enemies Act because they're invading our country with these Tren de Aragua members who are actually foot soldiers in a broader war being waged on us by Venezuela. And that's kind of where we're at. Frankly, that's what he believes. And he believes that that is sufficient legal grounds to deport summarily anyone who is accused of being a Tren de Aragua member. Now, one of the additional wrinkles here is that usually if you were to deport someone, you would deport them back to their home country. You know, they would, like a Venezuelan, for example, would be deported to Venezuela. That is not what is happening with people he is accused of being members of Tren de Aragua, right? And what they're doing instead is they are sending these accused people who, again, do not have a trial. They do not have an opportunity to defend themselves in a court of law. They do not have an opportunity before a judge to say, hey, but I'm actually not a member of Tren de Aragua, and here is my proof. They do not actually have any of that at all available to them. They are just accused by the government, and that is sufficient to abduct them and to deport them. Except instead of being deported to Venezuela, they're being deported to El Salvador. And on March 15th, these flights took off and started going to El Salvador, right? And, well, frankly, the dictator of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, has been gloating about it ever since on social media. And immediately upon the arrival of these flights, began to use them as press in El Salvador because he made an agreement with the US government. And that agreement is essentially that the US government pays El Salvador for the use of their mega private prison, a for-profit prison that forces prisoners to perform labor. Now, if you're thinking, hey, that sounds odd, that sounds weirdly similar to, I don't know, a slave labor concentration camp situation. Yes, it is in fact a slave camp. We have made an agreement to sell human beings to a foreign country that they are not from. We are engaging in a modern day slave trade with our taxpayer dollars. This is not this is not at all justifiable under US law at all. But here is a tweet from Nayib Bukele. Okay? From March 16th, that is 10 days ago, as of the recording of this video. Today, the first 238 members of the Venezuelan criminal organization Tren de Aragua arrived in our country. They were immediately transferred to CCOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center, for a period of 1 year, renewable. The United States will pay a very low fee for them, but a high one for us. Over time, these actions, combined with the production already being generated by more than 40,000 inmates engaged in various workshops and labor under the Zero Idleness program, will help make our prison system self-sustainable. As of today, it costs $200 million per year. The Zero Idleness program, by the way, that's the slavery program. That is saying, we are going to force you to work, or we're going to beat you. On this occasion, the United States has also sent us 23 MS-13 members wanted by Salvadoran justice, including 2 ringleaders. One of them is a member of the criminal organization's highest structure. This will help us finalize intelligence gathering and go after the last remnants of MS-13, including its former and new members, money, weapons, drugs, hideouts, collaborators, and sponsors. As always, we continue advancing in the fight against organized crime, but this time we are also helping our allies, making our prison system self-sustainable and obtaining vital intelligence to make our country an even safer place, all in a single action. May God bless El Salvador, and may God bless the United States. And just a real quick, these people have not seen a day in court to establish that they are members of MS-13. These people have not seen a day in court to establish that they are members of Tren de Aragua. There has been no actual legal system in place here. It is simply ICE pointing their fingers and saying, you're from Venezuela, you must be with Tren de Aragua. You have a tattoo, you must be with Tren de Aragua. These are all simply people who are accused of crimes with no evidence being presented. All right? And yes, Paladin Lost notes in chat, According to CERNA, approximately 54 Tren de Aragua members are currently in ICE detention. Another 172 are on the agency's non-detained docket, meaning they are living in the U.S. and subject to deportation, but not currently in custody. Additionally, around 32 TDA affiliates are in criminal custody with ICE detainers filed against them. Each of these 256 cells can house an average of 156 inmates. Sorry. The invasion force of foot soldiers of a Venezuelan incursion is 250 people max, and those are people who are not necessarily verified to be members of Tren de Aragua. Okay? And then each of these cells in this mega prison can house an average of 156 inmates. The cells are equipped with 4-level metal bunks with no mattresses or sheets, 2 toilets, and 2 washing basins. The cells are lit by artificial lights 24 hours per day. And keep in mind here, folks, that's 2 toilets and 2 sinks for 156 people. But let's take a look at the promotional video that the dictator of El Salvador shot for the Trump administration. The pageantry. Again, none of these people tried in a court of law. This is fascist propaganda.
When I say all police are bastards, I mean all police are bastards. And I think when ICE is abolished, I think we need to exile the people who worked for them from society.
Understandable sentiment. This is monstrous. It is insane. Demonic, I think, is I think is also a good a good word for it. Like, I mean, this is all being approved of by, you know, the worst folks in the world. It's insane how a leftist judge wanted to keep these animals roaming freely in American soil. I'm sorry, but like, on what grounds do you think you know anything about these people? You're just being told that they're criminals. You don't even know. We haven't even established who these people are. There has been no day in court. There has been no evidence. There has been nothing other than accusations. And guys, of course, this was signed off on. Thank you for your assistance and friendship, President Bukele, from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. What a fucking coward. And you know, like, oh yeah, great. Let's you know what? Let's find out what's going on in this prison. What to know about El Salvador's mega prison after Trump sent hundreds of immigrants there? Good point.
ICE agents and the people who support them are animals.
Let's see here. No, I'm good, AP. Occasionally, prisoners who have gained a level of trust from prison officials give motivational talks. Prisoners sit in rows in the corridor outside their cells for the talks or are led through exercise regimens under the supervision of guards. Bukele's justice minister has said that those held at CCOT would never return to their communities. You know, because just indefinitely holding people is good for crimes they were not actually tried for in a court of law. God. Animals don't do shit like this. True. The prison's dining halls, break rooms, gym, and board games are for guards. There are no amenities in this prison. There's nothing here except confinement and suffering. You know, like, it's genuinely that bad. CCOP prisoners do not receive visits and are never allowed outdoors. The prison does not offer workshops or educational programs that prepare them to return to society after their sentences. This is horrific. This is unironically a crime against humanity just by existing. It is pretty bad. Here, we need to talk about this real quick. Here's a CNN piece. Inside El Salvador's prison holding Venezuelans deported from the US.
Under a veil of darkness, they arrive shackled and seemingly shell-shocked, bound for a prison where the past is erased and the future is a door that never opens. More than 250 alleged criminals deported from the U.S. arriving in El Salvador over the weekend. Most are from Venezuela, accused of belonging to Tren de Aragua, a violent transnational gang. Their destination? El Salvador's terrorism confinement center, known as Secor, a supermax prison built by President Nayib Bukele to house his country's most dangerous criminals. One by one, hundreds of guards process these new arrivals, who are stripped of choice, power, and identity. It'll cost the U.S. about $6 million to keep them here for at least the first year. These images, released by El Salvador's government,
I don't understand how people report this story and aren't being incredibly clear that what they're doing here is a concentration camp. This is just a modern day concentration camp where their goal is just to work people to death.
And proudly shared online by President Bukele, highlight his controversial yet seemingly effective gang crackdown, while also positioning him firmly in president.
Also, can we just say, fuck these mainstream media outlets? You know, I disagree with his methods, but he does get results. Is not a fucking take you should have on concentration camps. This is yes, I do disagree with the brutality of Mussolini, but he does make the trains run on time. Fuck you.
President Trump's good graces, helping to fulfill Trump's mass deportation promises. President Trump thanking Bukele for his understanding of this horrible situation, adding, "We will not forget." Secot was built to contain, to isolate. All right, we're gonna go in here. And late last year, we stepped inside to see it for ourselves. These men described as the worst of the worst, tattooed with reminders of El Salvador's dark past. It's tense and uncomfortable, but here, officials say comfort isn't meant to exist.
There's no mattresses, there's no sheets. You've got a toilet over here for them to go to the bathroom. You've got this basin here that they use to bathe themselves. And then you can see there's a barrel of water that they can drink from. And he says there's always somebody standing here in front of the cells. And then if you look up, there's another corridor with more security personnel. Luz 24 horas. 24/7 light.
The prison sits like an isolated fortress, nestled in mountainous terrain, about an hour and a half drive from the capital.
It's been equated to 7 football stadiums. It's almost multiple prisons within the prison. The far end, you have one that's 9 meters high of concrete.
Can we just stop and say, keeping 100 people in one cell with no distractions, no anything, this is torture. This is torture. Our taxpayer dollars are going to torture people in another country for no established crime.
And then above that, 3 meters of electrified fencing.
At 15,000 volts.
15,000 volts.
More than 1,000 security personnel, guards, police, and military are stationed on site. Inmates are assigned to one of 8 sectors. Each sector holds more than 24 large cells.
Roughly 80 inmates per cell, but it can fluctuate. What is it like to live here?
It's probably not a hotel 5-star, but they give you the 3 times the food. They give you some programs. You go to do exercise.
Ejercicio nosotros lo podemos repetir siempre.
Some church or religion programs too.
But that's limited to just 30 minutes a day. The other 23 and a half hours, they're kept inside and locked up.
For inmates who get violent with other prisoners or guards,
we're going to close the door. I just want to get a sense of, wow.
solitary confinement awaits.
They literally just seal you away in a black room. This is what the Republican Party is championing. This is what they want. They want people to suffer with no ability to improve their situation, to get out of it in any way, to become better people. and understand that they are doing this same process and they are using this same bill under the Trump administration, the same Alien Enemies Act, to round up people who are in the United States legally, who have done no crimes. And that is just one small step away, one incredibly small step away from targeting US citizens that are inconvenient to the state. That's where we're at right now. There is a possibility here that this administration invokes this law in order to just, without a trial, without acknowledging your constitutional rights, without acknowledging, your due process, simply flying you directly to El Salvador, and then this is your life for an indefinite period of time. That's what this is. He's already threatened it. Yeah. Donald Trump has definitely already threatened this. And with each person who's here on a visa or a green card that they do this to, they're just flexing the muscle a little bit more. This is why we here in America need to get loud, and we need to stay loud until they break, until they back down, or until they commit to silencing us with violence. Okay? We need to be loud and we need to stay loud. There is no world in which being silent improves these things, in which refusing to organize in solidarity with one another improves our situation. We can under no circumstance continue to cede ground to these people. We need to organize in a big way and consistently. What have they supposedly done? There are no charges. CF, there's no charges against these people. They haven't had a day in court. There's nothing alleged against them other than, oh, there's some very bad dudes. Some of them are members of a gang we don't like. And that's it. There are no individual crimes or trials here. It's just accusations by the government. What's your plan for when they confirm that they'll use violence to suppress their own citizens? I'm not going to talk about that.
It doesn't matter what they supposedly done.
Olympians, thank you for the $5 donos. Appreciate them, as always. But yeah, depending on how things break, if they get to that point. My hope, though, is that I can help organize enough people to make a difference and enough people to avoid the worst case scenarios. So I'll cross that bridge to, deal with potential violent outcomes when we get there. But the entire point, I do want to remind people, the entire point of organizing en masse is so that if things do come to that violent head, we already have organized in solidarity with each other. And that means it is much easier to organize ourselves in a productive way should violence happen. And that, I feel like, is about the most I can say on that subject. But let's finish this up.
Waits.
The only light you get is through this hole, and they can be in here for 15 days, potentially. All right, I'm ready to get out.
Critics point specifically to the
15 days in a room where your only light is a hole in the ceiling.
prison's strict control and isolation of inmates, calling it a violation of human rights.
The director brought up that a lot of folks will raise concerns from a human rights perspective and an abuse of human rights, that he's calm hearing that because he sees it day to day the process they go through to maintain, as he sees it, proper punishment.
And now, that proper punishment isn't just for alleged Salvadoran criminals, it's also for those the US decides to send away.
You know, notice the very careful language there around the people in El Salvador who are in this prison. Alleged Salvadoran criminals. Not people who are proven guilty in a court of law. They're just alleged to be criminals by their dictatorial government. I've no doubt many of them are, but like, why on earth should we take that at face value without any kind of, transparent criminal justice system?
An outsourcing of confinement into Bukele's prized prison, merciless for those inside, but to many beyond these walls, Secor stands as a symbol of El Salvador's restored security.
Man, fuck the reporting at CNN. Fuck this fence-sitting nonsense. God. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? That's literally what we're talking about. The Alien Enemies Act that Trump is invoking is designed to destroy that entire process. Human F being, are you really throwing a piss fit about the fact that Automod has clapped you a couple of times? And the fact that, like, are you actually throwing a fit by having, like, certain messages being clapped by an automated bot in Twitch chat? And, like, why are you doing that? What? Stop being a child. Like, my God. Yeah, get the fuck out of here. I have no time for people like, oh, but my comedy is being ruined by an automated bot. Get fucked. Like, I'm sorry. You can, like, be like, oh man, I was gonna make some funny jokes, but the automod got me. Like, no one's sitting in chat banning you. If you were banned, you would know. You would know because it would say you're banned and you wouldn't be able to participate in the chat. And now, wow, look at that. Look at that magic trick I just pulled. Now you are banned. Congrats. You've successfully been a miserable cunt enough in my chat to be banned. Incredible stuff. Just fucking hell. Well, my comedy is broken. Yeah, all of your hilarious comedy jokes that you were making during the modern day American concentration camp segment. Like, I don't know, go to literally any other chat if you want to make your edgy jokes. We got 3 of them. So that is what CCOT in El Salvador is like. We also have a timeline of the flights, okay? And one of the things to note about the timeline of flights here is that this is going to be really important because, well, a large part of the case after these flights were in the air took place. And basically, as these flights were departing to go to El Salvador to drop these people off at this prison, what happened was, well, the hearing began. At that point, the judge learned about 20 minutes into the hearing that, hey, there are planes in the air right now. And the judge said, we are pausing this hearing so that we learn, like, what are the status of these deportations. So for about 40 minutes, the hearing is paused. And you can see here, the Washington Post actually did a good job. During the pause, 2 flights left in order to go to El Salvador. At 6 o'clock, the hearing resumes, and at 6:47, the judge verbally issues the order saying flights must return to the United States. Now, for those of you who might be a bit rusty on how federal judges work, wow, really, for 40 minutes? Yeah, they paused for 40 minutes so that the defendant, the government, could verify what the status of the flights were, which is a reasonable thing to do. However, they use that time to get the planes in the air. Those planes then did not respond to the judge's order to turn around and bring back the deportees to the United States. And what ends up happening here is that this then becomes kind of the crux of the whole issue, because at 6:47 p.m., the judge verbally orders this to take place. The planes must turn around. At 7:26 p.m., the order is then written down and enters kind of the docket, enters like the record, okay? Shortly after it enters the docket, a third flight takes off, headed from Texas to El Salvador. So at the very least, there is one flight that, despite a verbal and written order, takes off. However, you still have these 2 that were still in the air or in Honduras that did not then turn around. And now, one of the things that you need to understand about this case is that, well, when a judge issues a verbal or a written ruling or order, people are bound by that order. And so what has now happened is that Judge Bozeman, who is the one seeing this case through, is now basically trying to get down to the bottom of, hey, why did you, the DOJ, decide to ignore my orders? Did you do it by accident? Was there like a miscommunication? Or was this a willful breaking of a judge's order? And there's a difference there, because there is a possibility that the government simply, through incompetence or circumstance, just didn't end up happening. And, well, the judge has a duty to the law to be able to ascertain that. You and I, as people who are not legal professionals, presumably you're not, you just kind of a hypothetical, you, all of you, are not. But it's important for a judge to figure that out in order to properly rule on the consequences. Because if you are willfully breaking the order, the judge can basically say, I'm holding you in contempt. Someone goes to jail, essentially. And that is kind of where we're at. It's been kind of going back and forth here. And there have been a whole lot of attempts here to just obfuscate things in a way that is bizarre and at times funny in a way. And we'll get to that. But first, one thing we need to understand is that some of those people who were sent to that El Salvadoran prison were legally here in the United States. For example, here is the Miami Herald about 5 days ago reporting, despite refugee status in the US, young Venezuelan was deported to Salvadoran prison. This is what happens when there is no due process. This is what happens when there's no due process. And having read this article, this guy came through to the United States, followed the rules, followed the law, was granted by a judge refugee status, meaning he can legally remain here, and now, through no fault of his own, was seized by ICE and deported not to Venezuela, but to El Salvador to be tortured in that inhumane slave labor concentration camp. Full stop. Full stop. There is another story here because, of course, after these people were simply disappeared by the United States Gestapo, family members started coming out with stories about these deported folks. Agnello had told his sister on Friday night that he would be deported to Venezuela, she said in a phone interview with Reuters from Texas. Solanier said her brother had been detained on January 31st after an appointment with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office. He had crossed the U.S.-Mexico border illegally with Solanier and another sister in November of 2023 and had been released to pursue a claim for asylum. Solanier said an ICE officer told her that her brother was detained because of a tattoo that linked him to Tren de Aragua, a violent gang with Venezuelan prison origins that had spread through the Americans. She said the tattoo depicted a rose and that he had gotten it in a tattoo parlor in Dallas. They're arresting people because they see a tattoo. So Polly Has His Cracker brings up an excellent question, and I'm just going to read your question in full here. Just trying to wrap my head around something. The Alien and Sedition Acts 1798 only allows for deportation during war. Only Congress can declare war. Congress has not done this, correct? Correct. However, Donald Trump and his administration and his Justice Department are trying to argue that because in their formulation, Tren de Aragua is an extension of the Venezuelan government, that we are in the midst of an invasion. And thus, as a result of these foreign powers invading us, they are justified in invoking a Wartime Powers Act in order to deport them without a trial. That's the argument. They're saying that even though Congress hasn't officially declared war, we are in a de facto war due to this invasion. It is the flimsiest possible argument to make, and yet they're making it because they do not care about rule of law. What they care about is building up Donald Trump's dictatorial power. And the only way to combat this at this point is through the courts. It's fucking mental. It is. It's the stupidest argument I've heard in my life. Imagine you're a federal judge hearing that argument. You know? They're grabbing people for having rose tattoos and saying, ah, yes, you're a gang member because you have a tattoo. Insanity. Additionally, The Department of Justice under Donald Trump knows that it's full of shit, and that is why constantly, over the course of this case, the DOJ demands that the DC Circuit immediately reassign the case from Judge Boasberg, calling his questions flagrantly improper. I think I called Judge Boasberg Judge Bozeman earlier. That's my bad. Judge Boasberg. Calling his questions flagrantly improper. How dare you question us about the material facts of the case? It's improper to ask us for evidence. You fools, you simpletons, you buffoons. Like, that's where they're at, guys. They're literally trying to get the case dismissed on the grounds that the judge asking material questions to the case is a black mark on their record. It's insane. Also, Judge Boasberg is, well, let's just say not particularly amenable to this. And in fact, just responds to a lot of these by just summarily denying the response over and over and over again. Which is great. It is nice to see him basically smack down these absolutely insane takes. Saki Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs.
It feels like it's just a matter of time before they deport us citizen, born here to U.S. citizen parents, who never claimed asylum, and say nothing once queued.
That is exactly what they're queuing up to do. They are queuing up to, they're starting with undocumented, then they're moving to documented legal residents, and then they're going to move towards, natural born citizens. They're going to move all the way up there, and they're going to argue that, like, you're offering aid to our enemies in wartime. That's going to be the argument. And therefore we must deport you for the good of the country. Okay? So, let's continue going, shall we? Because we are not done with the turning of this case. Here, just some of the interactions are insane. Boasberg, I haven't heard that I've yet been removed from the case. Have you, Mr. Combley?
Citizenship
I
is
have
a
not, Your
function
Honor.
of the state. If they can deport non-citizens without due process, it's just a legal declaration that you're not a citizen until you're on a plane.
Yep. 100%. Judge Boasberg says he doesn't intend to rule on the government's behavior today, just to do some fact-finding on whether they obeyed his orders. Boasberg, plaintiffs identify 2 flights. Are you saying there were more than 2? I'm not at liberty to say. Also, I don't know. Boasberg, so you don't have the information. United States. Okay, what's the basis for not disclosing it to me? Boasberg, are you saying it's classified? Boasberg, why are you showing up today and not even having answers to why you can't disclose it? I mean, that's the purpose of the hearing. Maybe the answers are classified, maybe they're not. Maybe they shouldn't be heard by the public, but okay to be heard by me. United States Counsel, can't say. This is literal clown shit in this courtroom. Okay? If this was anyone other than the US government, these lawyers would be being placed in lockup for contempt for playing these games. Okay? Well, yeah, Johnson's response, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson is proposing to eliminate the entire federal branch of the judiciary, which I don't think he has the votes to do, but still very scary. Okay? Yeah, also Judge Boasberg is literally like has been on like all of the in all of the positions that would require him to see the most classified intelligence in the United States, and like trying to say it's too classified to tell to him when literally like the Washington Post can assemble a timeline of what happened because public figures within the Trump administration were constantly tweeting about it as it happened. Like, it's clown shit. It's literally clown shit. Yeah, and Amber Brains, they're trying to tell him that, oh, you actually are not qualified to even review classified material in private. It's just so classified that we cannot safely allow you to see it. That's the argument. Wait. Johnson wants to eliminate the judiciary, the federal branch of the judiciary. Like basically get rid of federal judges. Yeah. Yeah, you might have heard of Top Secret. It's actually Tippy Top Secret. Have you ever heard of that? Mr. Boasberg? I mean, Judge Boasberg? Yeah. Again, Johnson does not have the votes for that. I don't believe, but like, scary shit. Boasberg, okay, how about we come back tomorrow and you can provide me info in private? If it's classified, well, we can go to a classified facility. But if you're saying it's classified and you can't tell me, you'll have to make a showing that that's true. Can you provide in writing by noon, by tomorrow by noon, what your position is on communicating this information to me? US, yes, Your Honor, but we don't think it's necessary because we believe we complied with the written order. Boasberg, let me tell you the questions I wish you to answer. 1. How many planes departed the US at any time on Saturday, at any time based on proclamation? 2. How many people in that category were on each plane? 3. What foreign country or countries did each plane land in? 4. For each plane, I want to know when it took off and from where, what time it left US airspace, what time it landed in each foreign country, including if it made more than one stop, and what time individuals from those planes were transferred into each country's custody. It's crazy stuff. So this is just incredible. Boasberg, so when I said, Mr. Ensign, you should inform your clients immediately, however that's accomplished, whether it means turning around a plane, etc., you need to make sure that it's complied with immediately. You're telling me your first argument is that when I said those things, because it wasn't in a minute order, you didn't have to comply. That's your argument? You're telling me that very clear point, you're saying that you felt you could disregard it because it wasn't a written order? That's your first argument? United States Council, I'm stating what the position of the United States is. These people know they are cooked making these arguments, and yet they continue to waste the court's time in order to drag this out as long as possible. You knew in the morning that there would be a hearing at 5 p.m., so any planes you were putting in the air, you knew you had that hearing coming. So you're saying that because my minute order was pithier, that's a heck of a stretch, I think. Also, so I hear you make the argument that we were outside U.S. airspace and therefore the court did not have jurisdiction to order the planes to turn around. Is that your argument? Your Honor, that's what the statute says. Definition of removal. Boasberg replies, the point is that even if the enjoined acts are outside the territory of the US, you can't violate the injunction. If you don't like it, you can appeal it or seek to modify it. What argument do you have in equity to ignore court's orders? Court lost jurisdiction outside US airspace. And just real quick, guys. The argument that they tried to use on this judge, which failed spectacularly, by the way, is that if a judge gives a legal order and that order goes that order applies to people who are in international waters or outside of US airspace, that the legal orders carry no weight. Like, I'm sorry, but if you're on a cruise ship in international waters, a judge's ruling still carries weight there, actually. Like, if they're being run by the US military, US law still applies. Insane arguments. Yeah. Anyway, moving on, because this was just one interaction on one day. Here is a couple days later. Department of Justice complains to the DC Circuit again about Judge Boasberg, urging it to intervene before the US government exposes itself to potential judicial micromanagement of how it conducts foreign policy and national security operations. Which is fucking crazy. Like, oh man, a judge having legal rulings? The horror. The DOJ also tried to get the judge to vacate his temporary restraining order against the government, calling the TRO an affront to the president's broad constitutional and statutory authority to protect the United States from dangerous aliens who pose grave threats to the American people. Again, it's just been clown show after clown show in this courtroom. It's accompanied by an extremely unpersuasive declaration arguing that the TRO harms foreign policy, taking into account the significant time and energy expended over several weeks by high-level US government officials. It is clown shit. Also, and this is a day after that, by the way, after Judge Boasberg was like, no, I'm not vacating the TRO against you. A day after that, this takes place. And I'm just going to read it directly here. While it is true that many of the Tren de Aragua members removed under the AEA do not have criminal records in the United States, this is, again, the argument from the Department of Justice. That is because they have only been in the United States for a short period of time. The lack of a criminal record does not indicate they pose a limited threat. In fact, based upon their association with Tren de Aragua, which, as an aside, they have not been able to establish association because there has been no trial whatsoever. The lack of specific information about each individual actually highlights the risk they pose. It demonstrates that they are terrorists with regard to whom we lack a complete profile. They tried to argue to this federal judge that the lack of evidence was actually damning evidence that they are terrorists seeking to subvert and destroy the United States of America. That's where we're at. And like, in the argument subsequent to that, they talk about, well, and here are all of the crimes these people committed. And it's just like, if they did commit these crimes, why didn't you prosecute them in a court of law? If these people did these crimes and you have evidence of those crimes, why are you not prosecuting them in a court of law? It kind of begs the question, why you not doing that, huh? Strange. Again, these are like sworn declarations by the prosecution or by the defendants, which is the Department of Justice. Now, we are now, this filing is 3 days after March 15th, okay, when the deportations took place. The DOJ tells Judge Boasberg that it fervently objects to his requests for more information about deportation flights under the Alien Enemies Act, but if he insists, they could privately share some info. Which, just like... Dog... These people are so unserious. Also, just in case you're like thinking we're at the bottom of the barrel and how deeply unserious, and again, we have to take a lot of the reporting here. So thank you to all the lawyers who called in and listened in on these and reported on them as they happened, because there is no audio recording of any of these legal proceedings. Otherwise, we'd be watching and listening to that. But it was allowed for people to call in and listen to the proceedings over the phone. So many people in the legal profession did that. So a huge thank you to, for example, Joshua J. Friedman, who did this and reported on it. But in this case, in this courtroom, ICE tells Judge Boasberg that it understood Trump's Tren de Aragua proclamation to take effect only once it was posted to the White House website at around 3:53 p.m. on March 15th, despite being signed on March 14th, which you will note is the previous day. They're just lying. It is clown show shit. So then Judge Boasberg is like, okay, give us the information. Tell you have by noon tomorrow to get me that information. I want to understand what is happening here. Okay? You have to tell me what is going on. You are obligated to do this. God. Now we're talking about proceedings from March 20, either the 22nd or the 21st. So we're now a few days later. Okay? It gets really wacky here. Okay? Judge Boasberg begins by asking the Department of Justice is Ensign, 1, knew what Boasberg meant on Saturday about turning the planes around, and 2, did not then personally know anything about the planes. Ensign agrees on both. Okay? When the judge asks, what happens? What is the process? What is the recourse if the government gets it wrong and are actually deporting someone who is not a Tren de Aragua member? And the Department of Justice's go-to response here is essentially, oh, well, you see,
I'm behind, but I've been using DoorDash delivery to put up immigrant rights flyers in neighborhoods and earls at restaurants I pick up orders from.
oh,
It's
hell
better
yeah.
than nothing. Find your angle.
Logan Hill, that is a wonderful idea and a wonderful way of using your profession to like further the cause. That is good shit. That is good work right there. Love that for you. Okay? Good stuff. And I'm seeing some people saying that like there's some hiccups in the stream. I haven't lost any frames on my end. So on top of that, the DOJ just responds the recourse for these people who have been accused of being members of Tren de Aragua is that they should file a lawsuit on the grounds of their habeas corpus being violated. So, after you have been denied representation by your lawyer and you have been, abducted off the street and put into a facility 1,400 miles away, you should simply file a lawsuit on the grounds of habeas corpus, Fivehead, of course. From inside a prison labor camp? Well, that's the thing. If they get deported fast enough, they don't have the opportunity to actually file at all. Because once you're in El Salvador, you don't have that opportunity. There is no legal process. You are simply cooked. Okay? You do not have the option to file anything once you are in that El Salvadoran prison. It is honestly insane. And I just want to share this exchange here. How do they challenge that they are not Tren de Aragua and Venezuelan and or have LPR status, i.e. are not subject to the Alien Enemies Act? Are you going to tell each person? What is the role of the court? The DOJ. There are courts reviewing habeas claims in Texas on this front. That is a long way from the heartland of the act, Boasberg says in discussion with Lee Gellert, the plaintiff's lawyer. But Boasberg also acknowledges that there are cases that give him pause. Mainly that there are some cases where like people are clearly have broken the law and are violent criminals. And yet, Boasberg responds, I will get to the bottom of whether they violated my order, who ordered this, and what the consequences will be. Additionally, folks, it only gets weirder from here. This is from March 21st. According to Mark Joseph Stern, Judge Boasberg opened today's hearing by bringing up the intemperate and disrespectful language that I can't remember seeing from the U.S. in the Justice Department's filings. He is angry. Why was this proclamation essentially signed in the dark on Friday or Friday night or early Saturday morning and people rushed onto planes? Seems to me the only reason to do that is if you know it's a problem and you want to get them out of the country before a suit is filed. Which is absolutely what they did. The judge is getting real fucking angry over all of the attempted like hooliganism in his courtroom. Okay? Now, a really important development occurred on the 24th, 3 days ago, which is that the Judge Bozeman on the 23rd essentially said, look, you have to tell me the information that you are saying is classified, or you have to formally invoke the State Secrets Act. And the State Secrets, or State Secrets Privilege, rather, which is essentially saying, yes, these are official state secrets, and you see, they are simply too secret for us to show to a federal judge. Okay? And again, really want to emphasize their foundation for claiming state secrets privilege is incredibly shaky. Because we already have a bunch of the information here about the timing of the flights. Again, based on flight trackers that track the planes, based on statements made by elected officials and appointed officials like Marco Rubio, Kristi Noem. Okay, there's a lot we already know. To claim that these are state secrets when this was openly celebrated by people who had access to the information is insane. There's literally a tweet from Nayib Bukele, the dictatorial president of El Salvador, basically going, neener, neener, neener. It's too late. They're already here. Like jeering at the federal judiciary. Like, it is beyond the pale of what is usual for federal courtrooms. This statement, the invocation of the State Secrets Act, or the State Secrets Doctrine, or privilege. Just take a quick look here. After considering all relevant information, including the declarations of the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Homeland Security, and following an independent legal review by the Department of Justice personnel, I am satisfied that the assertions of the state secrets privilege by the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Homeland Security regarding information requested by the court's March 18th, 2025 minute order are adequately supported and warranted, and I join their assertion of privilege. I declare under penalty of perjury pursuant to 28 U.S.C. 1746 that the foregoing is true and correct. This is on the 24th of March. Signed by Marco Rubio and Kristi Noem. You might also recognize those folks as people who were on the goddamn leaked Signal chat. These people very clearly care very much about security and confidentiality of state secrets. So much so that they used an unsecured app on their unsecured phones in order to talk about it with folks. That's where we're at right now, guys. It's literal clown shoes shit. And I, for one, am somewhat heartened by the fact that this judge, who is absolutely sick to death of all of these shenanigans related to state secrets, is now also going to be presiding over the Signal chat cases. He was randomly assigned those cases. So now he has both of these things to spin. And I'm going to guess he's rapidly running out of patience for these chuckle fucks. Because, like, guys, these people are horrible and, like, very clearly violating constitutional rights and all manner of legality in our system. Here's Kristi Noem at the El Salvadoran prison, gloating over this.
Here at CCOT today and visiting this facility. And first of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people. Here at CCOT.
God, I hate this bitch. On top of that, oh, look at that. It's Nayib Bukele mocking a federal judge. Oopsie, too late. Haha. They do not care that they are removing people who are here legally. They do not care. One of the things I wanted to point out here is that people who study concentration camps and genocides are raising the alarm about this. This is not just a me thing, like, oh man, this really looks like a concentration camp. Andrea Pritzker wrote a book called One Long Night, A Global History of Concentration Camps. One could say she's an expert on the topic. And, well, here is her Blue Sky post. When I wrote my camps book, people sometimes had difficulty understanding how concentration camp regimes were proud of what they were doing and wanted attention for it, even as they also hoped to keep many aspects secret and terrorize vulnerable classes. Anyway, this is what that looks like.
Biden administration abused to facilitate the mass illegal entry of illegal immigrants into our country. It was like a fast pass at Disneyland. That's not happening under this administration. We are encouraging illegal immigrants to actively self-deport to maybe save themselves from being in one of these fun videos. Sure. John, good to see you.
One of these fun videos. Actual ghouls. Actual ghouls. And not only that, folks, we now get to more recent events that are not great, to say the least. We do have a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, just as an FYI. But, like, I need people to understand that this is very, very serious. Like, really serious. Here's an article from Slate. The Justice Department just debuted a new defense of Trump. It's terrifying. And let's get to what the defense is. On Monday, Donald Trump's Department of Justice made two arguments in two different courts that, taken together, amount to a legal claim of near dictatorial power by Trump. First, it informed a federal appeals court that the president has authority to declare any non-citizens to be alien enemies and to deport them to a foreign prison where they will be forced to perform hard labor indefinitely without notice, a hearing, or any meaningful opportunity to prove their innocence. Second, it refused to provide U.S. District Judge James Boasberg with details of these mass deportation operations, even in a closed courtroom, even under seal, insisting that Boasberg's authority must yield to the mandate of the electorate. In other words, Trump's electoral victory grants him an absolute right to conduct these deportations, rendering them unreviewable by the judiciary. Though that's the recipe of basically recreating a divine right of kings. Except instead of a divine right of kings, it's the divine mandate of the masses. Except that you can just claim that for having a slim electoral victory, apparently. This is deeply unconstitutional. This is deeply evil. And it seeks to essentially dissolve our Constitution whole cloth. That's what this does. And this is why it's so dangerous that they had been trying to impeach justices, and they're floating different ideas of how to get rid of any of these judges that seek to essentially prevent them from doing what they want to do, prevent them from having full dictatorial power. That's like saying I can murder someone because I was voted the prom queen. Yes, that is exactly the argument, in fact. Well, the president was voted in as the president, so he can just shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue. He's a special birthday boy because of that, you see, above the rule of law. And one of the things I really want to hammer home here as a potential pathway to a silver lining is that many people assume, hey, Donald Trump was ruled by the Supreme Court to have immunity, which means he can do anything and no one can touch him. That is true in a sense. However, there is a very important caveat in that immunity from prosecution only applies to power within the president's purview. It does not apply to the president violating the Constitution. Okay? It does not apply to violating the Constitution. He can be prosecuted for that.
The prom queen can't murder people? My entire understanding of Carrie needs a rethink.
Yeah, Carrie had the mandate of the masses, didn't you guys know? She was elected prom queen. And then she just killed all those people because, that is her prerogative as queen. So that's where we're at there. And additionally, folks, Mother Jones did a really good expose, and I'm going to link it in chat here because I think it is well worth a read and well worth sharing around. This was published earlier today, but it's basically a documentation of the families who are searching for and trying to understand what has happened to their loved ones who have been disappeared into this El Salvador prison system. Yep. On Friday, March 14th, Arturo Suarez Trejo called his wife, Natalie Sanchez, from an immigration detention center in Texas. Suarez, a 33-year-old native of Caracas, Venezuela, explained that his deportation flight had been delayed. He told his wife he'd be home soon. Suarez did not want to go back to Venezuela. Still, there was at least a silver lining. In December, Sanchez had given birth to their daughter, Nahiara. Suarez would finally have a chance to meet the 3-month-old baby girl he had only ever seen on screens. But Sanchez told Mother Jones she has not heard from Suarez since. Instead, last weekend, she found herself zooming in on a photo the government of El Salvador published of Venezuelan men the Trump administration had sent to President Nayib Bukele's infamous Terrorism Confinement Center, or CCOT. I realized that one of them was my husband, she said. I recognized him by the tattoo on his neck, by his ear, and by his chin. Even though I couldn't see his face, I knew it was him. The photo, Sanchez explained, in a highly produced propaganda video promoted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the White House, showed Venezuelans shackled in prison uniforms as they were pushed around by guards and had their heads shaved. The tattoo on Suarez's neck is of a colibri, a hummingbird. His wife said that it's meant to symbolize harmony and good energy. She said his other tattoos, like a palm tree on his hand, a homage to Suarez's late mother, his late mother's use of a Venezuelan expression about God being greater than a coconut tree, were similarly innocuous. Nevertheless, they may be why Suarez had been effectively disappeared by the U.S. government into a Salvadoran mega prison. And let's just call it what it is. It's a concentration camp. Mother Jones has spoken with friends, family members, and lawyers of 10 men sent to El Salvador by the Trump administration based on allegations that they are members of the Venezuelan organized crime group Tren de Aragua. All of them say their relatives have tattoos and believe that is why their loved ones were targeted. But they vigorously reject the idea that their sons, brothers, and husbands have anything to do with Tren de Aragua, which the Trump administration recently labeled a foreign terrorist organization. The families have substantiated these assertions to Mother Jones, including in many cases by providing official documents attesting to their relatives' lack of criminal histories in Venezuela. Such evidence might have persuaded U.S. judges that the men were not part of any criminal organization had the Trump administration not deliberately deprived them of due process. It is horrific. And in case there's any doubt here, just some of this is... Suarez's older brother, Nelson Suarez, said his siblings' tattoos were intended to help him stand out from the crowd. Quote, as Venezuelans, we can't be in our own country, so we come to a country where there's supposedly freedom of expression, where there are human rights, where there's the strongest and most robust democracy, Nelson said. Yet the government is treating us like criminals based only on our tattoos or because we're Venezuelan, without a proper investigation or a prosecutor offering any assistance. It's sick. Robert Cerna, an acting field office director for ICE's removal operations branch, said the agency did not simply rely on social media posts or tattoos. But Cerna also acknowledged that many of the Venezuelans deported under the Alien Enemies Act had no criminal history in the United States, a fact he twisted into an argument to seemingly justify the summary deportations without due process. This is the guy who argued that, essentially, the lack of evidence is evidence, which is insane. This article is just full of stories about folks, the people, the actual real people who are affected by this. One of the people deported may have been deported over the fact that his younger brother, has autism. And so, in solidarity, he got an autism awareness tattoo. What the hell is happening to our country? What's happening is something that we must fight with literally everything we have. Make your plans to organize, make your plans to fight, and make your plans to flee if you become a target of this administration. We're getting close to an endgame scenario, but we are not quite there. But I need to really hammer home that this is what the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act entails. This is what the powerful are using to do with it, are fixing to do with it, you know? And like, I need you also to be aware of where Republicans, these far-right fanatics, are pushing with this. Because it's the same place that every single government that fixes to do mass deportations ultimately ends up in the process of dehumanizing folks. And that is that it is cheaper to kill the people you are targeting for deportation than it is to do a mass deportation, than it is to do a mass ethnic cleansing. A bullet is cheaper than an airplane. Gas is even cheaper than a bullet. And yeah, there's a reason why the Nazis called it a final solution. And you are already having people in the far right calling for mass executions. You're already getting that, you know? Let me throw this out there here.
Guess it's fair to call this a regime now?
We're getting fucking close. Sorry, I was trying to do a fact check real quick. Here is Valentina Gomez, someone who ran for Republican office in 2022, I believe. And 2024. She lost her primary, which I guess is good, but she's fixing to run again in 2026. So this is cheaper than deportation. And she has a dummy staged to look like a human being. This is someone who wants to be in Republican politics. She said this in response to J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. This is where Republicans are right now, chat. This is where wannabe Republican figures and elected officials and would-be elected officials are right now. So what you want to be doing here is I want you to look at this picture, and I want each of you to engrave on your hearts that you will fight these ungodly motherfuckers. These people who besmirch the very soil that they stand on with their depravity, with their violence, and with their deeply, deeply despotic values. We must mobilize and we must commit here and now to do everything we can in our communities to shore up the safety of those who live here. Yes, they are an enemy to all of humanity. Because if someone is willing to do this to an undocumented immigrant, they're willing to do it to a U.S. citizen. Can you call them deranged psychopaths? Yeah. So what you guys need to do is you need to look around your communities. Where is there a need? What can you do to organize more people? How can you get more people out to protests? Where can you drop pamphlets? Where can you put up posters? Where can you show solidarity and build that up in your community so your community has a culture of resistance to this shit? Because this is a stain on our history and a stain on our present day, and we must wash it out. We must have a commitment to the Constitution, a commitment to the values of freedom and egalitarianism, a commitment to helping and standing alongside one another and making sure we get through this intact. Now, I want to bring it all the way to the end here. Okay? We need to bring it all the way to the end, to today. 10 hours ago. What ended up happening with the Boasberg case is essentially that the DC Circuit had brought to them a request to stay the halt on the implementation of the Alien Enemies Act. Essentially, the Department of Justice under Donald Trump got tired of waiting for this Boasberg, got tired of this back and forth with the judge, and instead tried to appeal up to the DC Circuit and say, oh, hey, we would like you to allow us to continue implementing the Alien Enemies Act, please. And in a 2-1 decision, the DC Circuit denied the Trump administration a stay on the restraining order against the Alien Enemies Act. So the good news here is that the DC Circuit Court handily slapped down what could have been a really terrible outcome. Okay? And I actually think this thread by Aaron Reichlin Melnick is really good at breaking down kind of what this means, and the decisions of the court. This guy works at the American Immigration Council. I've been finding myself following more and more lawyers these days, so I can try to translate all of these circumstances to you folks. I hope I'm doing an okay job constructing the narrative and presenting the information, but we're in the final stretch here, okay? In the final stretch. So, first up, we have Judge Henderson on the DC Circuit Court, okay? She says that the DOJ has every right to basically review Judge Boasberg's order. But basically, what the DOJ was trying to push for is that, well, actually, this is all being heard by a federal judge here in Washington, D.C., when in reality, all of these people were deported from Texas, so the case should be heard in Texas. And Judge Henderson, it just basically is like, no, it's being heard here in Washington, D.C. This is where the court order was implemented. You know, like this is where the people ordering the planes were located. You know, like this is the jurisdiction. Henderson then goes over 5 pages of basically dismantling the government's argument that there is an invasion happening right now. And I'm going to read from her writing here. When the Constitution repeats a phrase across multiple clauses and the early Congresses echo that phrase in statute, it is a strong signal that the text should be read in pari materia. Okay? The theme that rings true is that an invasion is a military affair, not one of migration. What evidence does the government muster against the weight of this evidence? It marshals a lone contemporary dictionary and then plucks the third order usage of the term after skipping over its still more common military meaning. Guys, I want to, can we take a moment? Can we take a moment and acknowledge that rather than make any argument grounded in the law, the argument that the Department of Justice went with was, well, the third definition in the dictionary says you could possibly call it an invasion in a colloquial sense. That's the argument that the Department of Justice is trying here, guys. No judge worth their salt would agree with this. This is truly, well and truly busted. Exactly. God, Landom Lazy Lizards Lounge. Yeah, exactly. It's insane. Well, also, guys, the DOJ doesn't have enough lawyers to handle this shit. It's wild. Hey, Mr. Anderson. Haven't seen you in a while. Now, the other judge that voted along, or, ruled alongside Judge Henderson is Judge Millett. And Millett basically agrees with everything that Henderson writes. Yeah. Basically, he's like, yeah, you're right. Also, the case definitely should not be heard in Texas. She argues that the law is being invoked improperly, and then her opinion basically tackles the Alien Enemies Act and its invocation. So I'm going to read off part of her statement here. At the same time, the injury to the plaintiffs is great and truly irreparable. They face immediate removal on grounds that they have no that they say have no application to them, and yet their claims have never been heard. And the removals under the AEA thus far have not been to their home countries, but directly into a Salvadorian jail reported to have a notorious reputation for human rights abuses and disappearances. Worst of all, the government has confessed that its preference that plaintiffs use habeas corpus to challenge their eligibility for AEA removal is a phantasm. The government's position at oral argument was that the moment the district court TROs are lifted, it can immediately resume removal flights without affording plaintiffs notice of the grounds for their removal or any opportunity to call a lawyer, let alone file a writ of habeas corpus or obtain any review of their legal challenges to removal. It is irreparable injury to reduce to a shell game the basic lifeline of due process before an unprecedented and potentially irreversible removal occurs. So basically, are they flooding the courts with bullshit cases? Kind of. But the thing about the bullshit cases is that when you get a temporary restraining order against you for one of those bullshit cases, you can't just keep doing the thing. Will the DOJ hire more judges then? Actually, the thing that they've been suggesting is firing judges, which other Republicans disagree with because they want an opportunity to get more Republican judges in office. So, will the DOJ hire more lawyers then? Most lawyers don't want to work with the DOJ under Donald Trump. They know what a bullshit job it is to be asked to go out and make these arguments, because these arguments are legitimately so bad, guys. Legitimately so bad. That there's a risk that by making these arguments, you could be disbarred. That's the level of, terrible argumentation these lawyers are being asked to do. There's even... I listened to a bunch of legal podcasts in order to prep myself for this. By the way, I do recommend Liz Dye's Crime and Chaos pod. Which is really, really great. Wait, is it Crime and Chaos? No, I don't think it's that. Liz Dye. Law and Chaos. That's what it's called. The Law and Chaos podcast. And I highly recommend that. Is Legal Eagle covering this? Legal Eagle put out a video a week ago covering it. But Liz Dye is one of the lawyers that is frequently on Legal Eagle, and I would recommend her podcast if you want more information about the ongoing legal kerfuffles that are happening. I found it really helpful to hear her and Andrew Torres, who's a legal journalist, talk about this and break it down. Okay? Legal as Fuck is also very good. True. That being said, like, totally forgot where I was at prior to the legal eagle derail. Oh, will they hire more lawyers? The scuttlebutt is that even these major law firms are going to run into problems with the promised services that they said they would provide to the Trump administration, largely because that work, that pro bono work that they promised to the Trump administration, has to be done by someone. And generally, when a law firm promises pro bono work, that work is then done by like newbies at the firm. And no one new in this profession wants to get their start arguing for the Trump administration with the shittiest arguments imaginable. No one wants to do that. They accepted a job at a big law firm so that they could make a name for themselves in the law. You don't make a name for yourself by falling on the stupidest arguments known to man that people would rather, like, do anything else other than that in the legal profession. Yeah, no one who wants a legal career. True. Anyway, let's move forward. We'll finish up here with Judge Millett's concluding statement in full, which reads, over 150 years ago, the Supreme Court addressed whether civilian courts could be closed just because the executive declared an emergency, and the court said no. Quote, the Constitution of the United States is a law for rulers and people equally in war and in peace, and covers with the shield of its protection all classes of men at all times and under all circumstances. No doctrine involving more pernicious consequences was ever invented by the wit of man than that any of its provisions can be suspended during any of the great exigencies of government. The government's removal scheme denies plaintiffs even a gossamer thread of due process, even though the government acknowledges their right to judicial review of their removability. The district court's temporary restraining orders have appropriately frozen the status quo until an imminent motion for preliminary injunction is filed. The district court acted well within its discretion in doing so. We lack jurisdiction to review the government's motion to stay those orders, and the government's jurisdictional obligations to the district court's actions do not raise a substantial question at this stage. For all of the foregoing reasons, I agree that the government's motion for stays must be denied. That's some good shit right there. So that is where we are at. Now, the one dissenter is Judge Walker, and he's a real piece of shit. And his main argument is that the only way Judge Walker does not actually engage with the legality of any part of this, because his argument begins and ends with, this should be done in Texas. And that's the most he looked into the case. And he then goes on to say that actually the only way to legally challenge an Alien Enemies Act is through habeas corpus action, which must be filed wherever ICE puts these people. And in some cases, ICE doesn't put them anywhere. ICE just puts them directly on a plane or keeps them in a holding cell for a length of time that is not, in fact, it's not in fact possible for people detained by ICE to contact their lawyers for the amount of time they are there. So, and his argument about this is that, well, in Texas, 2 cases were filed under habeas, so that means it's doable. And he also concludes by saying that if the ACLU wants to, intervene on behalf of these people being detained by ICE, they can file a habeas class action lawsuit, which is not a thing that exists. And in even Judge Walker's writing, he admits that it might not exist. Actual clown shoes from both this particular judge and the DOJ. But that's where we're at, folks. So far, this is still being warred over in the courts, but it must be decided by Judge Boasberg. And so far, Judge Boasberg appears to be a pretty reasonable judge who is, with every passing day, growing more sick and more tired of this administration's efforts to have him impeached, to talk down to him, to try and claim that they are not bound by different time decrees to present information to him. And he is, in fact, not pleased with the DOJ or impressed by their arguments. And I think that ultimately that is very, very good. And I think that a lot of what his actions have shown as he goes through this entire process is it seems like he is shoring up all of the different ways the Department of Justice could attempt to appeal after he has a final ruling on it. Essentially, he's trying to basically say and formulate a narrative and an argument as a judge that you have no grounds to appeal this. This will be the final say. And then if they go, well, we're going to appeal it up to the Supreme Court anyway, he has ready and presented the Supreme Court with a rock-solid argument and already headed off any of their potential tangential arguments on the case. So that's where we're at. CF, the entire purpose of this segment is to indicate to you that no one is safe in America. No one is safe from this particular type of government overreach. The arguments that they are making are designed to ensure that anyone could be the victims of ICE disappearances and deportations. That is the entire argument being put forward here. Whew, boy. So I think that segment might actually be like 2 hours long or something. But we have come to the end. That is where we're at. We must at every turn oppose the encroachment of fascism, and we must in fact act, okay? There are a number of ways you can do this. You can look at your local area and check out different indivisible groups that are meeting, that are trying to do different things. For example, in my area, there's a group defending Social Security on April 3rd. There is a Get Out the Vote in Wisconsin action on April 1st. There's a lot of different actions for Susan Crawford in Wisconsin. Those are going to differ by place. Go check out where you can mobilize in your community. I'm going to put that link in chat here for all of you guys. I'll also put the links in the doobly-doo for you all as well, because the only way we get through this is by getting up and making a lot of noise and not shutting up. We need to be loud. We need to be consistent. We need to make sure we continue to fight in ways that actually move the needle. Okay?
Still very behind, but a 15-year plus Subaru is a boo-boo-roo. Hope this helps the repairs. I own one too. Love the old workhorse.
Logan Hill, thank you for the $5 super chat. Really appreciate it. Folks, you can also give comment on the HHS ruling that is attempting to change the rules around trans healthcare in the Affordable Care Act. Really important that we get out comment on that in order to enable us to fight back and maintain trans healthcare. Additionally, folks, you need to make sure you are calling your senators, calling your representatives. It's really important. You can use 5 calls in order to get that done. Makes it really, really easy. But especially when it comes to these Venezuelan deportations and the Alien Enemies Act, you need to mobilize your people in Congress. It is really, really important we are all on the same page about this. And that includes your elected officials. And you need to pressure them in order to change how they act in Congress. In the absence of your action to pressure them, they will not act. How good should my comment be on the rule change? The best it can be? I don't know how to answer that. It should be good. It should be good and not shit, you know? Additionally, folks, you can mail in Freedom of Information Act requests to Doge in order to request various documents from them. They are legally obligated to respond to you, and if they don't, you can join a class action lawsuit against Doge to get said documentation and information out from Doge. Very important stuff.
For the mighty Jack.
Hannah, thank you for the 10 pounds. I really fucking appreciate it. Thank you so much. Additionally, folks, if you need help in your area or you want to just do some agitprop and spread information, here is a link to the ACLU Massachusetts Know Your Rights page that basically goes over having a family preparedness plan for if ICE comes knocking. Useful, immensely. Additionally, folks, April 5th, mark your calendars, check out 5050.1 in order to see where protests are happening in your neck of the woods, because on April 5th, there is going to be a nationwide protest. We need to get as many people out there as possible. And on top of that, folks, there's a lot of work to do next week. A lot of work to do, okay? If you have design chops, there's a new agitprop area in the Discord under resources. Thank you so much for making that, Salmon Moose. Yes, join our Discord. We have different tools to help folks in various communities across the United States, especially for relocating, getting mutual aid assistance, etc. And also now for organizing when it comes to agitprop. If you want to create propaganda against this horrific regime that would kill us all. Additionally, folks, please consider mobilizing for Josh Wheel, okay? Josh Wheel has an actual shot of flipping a congressional district in Florida. There are phone banking opportunities in this. His election is on April 1st, so Tuesday of next week. And we need to get people knocking doors in that district. We need to get people calling on the phone to do phone banking, because we need as many people to get out the vote as possible. He is within the margin of error of his Republican opponent. People are mad. People are motivated. You need to help get out the vote in that district, because guess what, folks? If we flip a Republican district, that gets us a little bit closer to flipping the House, makes it a lot harder for Republicans to pass horrific legislation to fuck us all over in the House. So please put effort in when it comes to this district. Yeah, Pennsylvania just flipped a state Senate seat that Trump won by 15 points. They just flipped it. Nothing is impossible right now. Go, go, go. Okay? That's where we're at. What's this protest for? Is it it's a general protest. The entire idea of 5051 is one protest every month in all the capitals of every state. Additionally, folks, you need to pick something. You need to pick something to invest your time and your energy in, because it is very goddamn important. All right. I put a lot of my time and my energy into this stream. That's why I'm out here. That's why I'm at the end. I just did a 7-hour long stream because it's important. It's important. I worked all day today to prep this stream, to get content out there, to help organize folks. It's important. I'm burning my candle at both ends because it's important to fucking fight. We need to fight. And the best way we can help the battle in the courts is to mobilize and show up in the streets. You need to get out there and protest. 5051 is also partnering with Indivisible. Indivisible is also organizing a gigantic April 5th mobilization. It's basically the test case for how close we are to mass mobilization for a nationwide protest for a 1 million man march on Washington. That's where we're going with this, guys. This is not just like aimless in its endeavor. This is not just being put together by people who don't know what they're doing. People know what they're doing. They just need you to put on your walking shoes and get the fuck out there and to bring other people with you. Curious, how does protest in the streets affect the courts? It lays the groundwork for where the people are at. It sets up people to have a better argument. If you want to think of it this way, it creates a playing field upon which the court operates. It is kind of the background radiation of the court, but by amping up that pressure through mass protest, we can help, at the very least, potentially weigh an outcome one direction or another. Okay? When is the 1 million man Washington March? I don't know. But that is what social movements of the past in America have done, and I have no doubt that's where things are heading right now. Okay? Make a fun sign. Get a microphone. Make sure you practice good operational security. Don't bring your phone with you. Consider maybe bringing a camera, but use it wisely. Doesn't seem like courts would care, but I'm so happy to be out there. I mean, generally speaking, one-eyed heathen, the courts don't care. But when we're talking about mass mobilization, they start to care. When you look back at the history of the civil rights movement and the rulings of the courts, the mass mobilization mattered. Don't bring a phone. Don't bring a phone to a protest. Or at the very least, if you do bring a phone to a protest, make sure you leave before things get too hairy, because you do not want them arresting you while you have your phone. Yes, you all have permission to use Signal to organize, because y'all aren't the U.S. military. Very good point, Savin Moose. Skylight in YouTube chat writes, I literally set up a general protest against my governor in a different town by getting in touch with leaders there. Get connected, it can be done. Hell yeah, that's the kind of attitude I like to see. Or bring a burner. Van Briggs, thinking next level. Thinking next level. I'll just leave it in my car in that case. Good plan, Brutus Magnuson. Oof, the Million Man March was called by Louis Farrakhan. I'm just talking about the history of protests in the United States. I'm talking about like when Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights leaders walked on Washington, D.C. I don't know how many people were there, but it looked like a fuck ton to me. You know? I'm not saying we paved the way with what Louis Farrakhan did, but I am saying like, hey, maybe you know, maybe the 1963 March on Washington had a good point there. You know, like maybe maybe that was good. Maybe we should do that again. Yeah, the March on Washington in 1963 had 250,000 people attend. And I guess it was called in full the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Which doesn't really roll off the tongue quite as well as Million Man March, but you know what? We'll take it. Kalishna! Hell yeah, just went to my first protest at a Tesla dealership. We didn't have a big turnout, but it was absolutely wonderful. Felt weirdly empowered when people would scream obscenities at us. Hell yeah! Hell yeah! Also, join your Tesla takedown protests, okay? You can go to teslatakedown.com. Yeah, I'm gonna add this activist checklist to the call to action. I think I want to look at it a bit more, just because I like looking at stuff that people suggest before I start blasting it out to all of you. You know, I don't want to have the so I started blasting mentality. You know, I love seeing you guys do cool shit. Love to see it. Oh, Amber Brains, hit me up. I have a trans body care question my daughter asked, and I don't know the answer, so I'm going to pop over to Chit Chat and Discord after stream to ask for Rex for my daughter. Hell yeah. Let's go. I think I saw a request for people to make signs. To help make signs? Yep. People need help doing that. Oof. How effective is a painter's mask against pepper spray? Worth giving a shot. Is the government listening to me through my phone at all times? No. Is a private company listening to you through your phone at all times? Maybe. Probably. Beer Bash Johnson, thank you so much for the raid. Folks, let's we did it. We made it through a segment that I knew was going to be huge. I knew it was going to be long. Y'all stuck with me. Really, really appreciate it.